Two of this year's big title favourites, Freddie Slater and Rafael Camara in FRECA and F3 respectively, have both shown their first real cracks last weekend in an otherwise near-perfect season. Hello and welcome fellow motorsports fans. I want to examine said flaws with you today, along with talking about most of the other single-seater action. To keep this episode manageable, I have decided to drop the F4 level series altogether this week so we can properly dive into the Formula regional level. We start with something short and sweet. EuroFormula Open, which looked a lot more like the expected title fight this time around, with Timmy Kartik striking back against Ivan David. Yes, one of the duels got interrupted when Shin smashed into David from behind, but either way, Kartik this time had the form to fight for wins and no weird clutch issues. This battle should be an absolute banger until the end of the season. And a brief shout out to the broadcast team. This time they managed to show the timing tower significantly more often and, at least in my opinion, it drastically improved the product we've got to watch at home. I'll just pretend they did it for me. The second round of FRECA did change up the order at the front a little bit with a non-scoring day on Sunday for both Freddie Slater and Evan Giltaire. Giltaire may have lost it in qualifying, but in Slater's case we are seeing a pattern emerge. The guy is a little prone to getting into incidents when he can't do his thing from pole position like he's used to. Between GB3 at Silverstone, Misano and now Spa, he has had some sort of incident in his 3 last race weekends. Sure, he also got his maiden win in FRECA, but this is still one way to potentially lose the title later down the line. The man of the weekend really was Enzo Dellini for me, even if he just about lost P2 in the first race to championship leader Matteo De Paolo. Dellini has arguably the most difficult teammates to go up against and so far is firmly the guy to beat for RSGP. Jun Nakamura in some ways looks like a Slater light, quick but too prone to getting into chaos so far with an accident in race 1 and a penalty in race 2. Nevertheless, a lot of positive signs from the guy and it is surely only a matter of time until he'll convert it into points. The Van Amersfoort Racing team lead question was also an interesting one, as this time Pedro Claro was entirely absent, so much for consistency, but instead rookie teammate Hiro Yamakoshi had a stellar pair of races, including his maiden podium with a sweet attacking drive to claim P2. Shout out to Rashid Al-Daheri. The somewhat recently announced Mercedes Junior may have been robbed of a good result in race 2, but that pole position was still clearly a good sign going forwards. And he has so far consistently gotten the better of Jack Beaton, so this year it might have not just been a home track thing over the winter. With Freddie Slater busy in FRECA, GB3 was rather wide open at the front for its Zandvoort round. Axel Motorsport had a big weekend, with Patrick Heusenroder having his breakout weekend in the series with 2 excellent runs in the regular grid races. Combined with his lack of DNF so far, this actually means the racy Aussie now finds himself in the championship lead, even if this is most likely just a temporary thing. Alex Dunne and Gianmarco Pradel still looked very closely matched for the team lead at Rowland, and by extension one of the key title challenger positions. While Abby Pulling unfortunately had a bit of an off weekend compared to her stellar debut. In similar fashion, Noah Lyle looked decidedly more average this time around, a lot more like his expected performance if I'm being honest. Although, to be fair to him, he also lacks teammates to properly compare him to. Deegan Fairclough looked a lot more like the guy we've expected coming into the season as well, but in a good way. Firmly front-running all weekend with 2 podiums to his name, showing how he became the most dominant British F4 champion in history, and making his supposedly good high-tech teammates look a lot more mediocre as well. Shout out to Hugo Schwartz for taking his maiden victory. Yeah, sure, only in the reverse grid, but he is also driving for struggling VRD. After he adjusted well last season to the big jump from Ginetta Juniors straight to GB3, I was worried he might leave single-seaters already once he announced a full season in the Michelin Le Mans Cup. Which, by the way, he is also looking rather good in, I might add. Instead, he is back for a full season assault and got rewarded for one hell of an opening lap here Very happy for the guy. The regular season of Eurocup-3 is finally here, and it was pretty much a straight continuation from the winter series, with only one key Polish difference, but we'll get to that in a second. Mateo Konagi and Maciej Gladish very much looked like the two main contenders once again as the MP duo we know and love at this point. Gladish may have cost himself a bit in the first race before going on to dominate the second, but I still think showing that he can charge his way through the field with overtakes was also a statement drive in its own right, despite the poor end result. The aforementioned Polish difference maker though was indeed not Gladish. He was of course there over the winter already, but rather Kasper Stuka, now part of the series for a proper full season assault. The former Red Bull Junior is still very much looking for redemption after his disastrous F3 campaign last season, and so far he might just be on the right track. Second race might have not fully gone to plan, but he was still clearly fighting Jules Caranta and Ernesto Rivera for the top spot at Campos. In general, while the favourites are mostly driving for MP, Campos should produce one hell of an inter-team battle this season. We'll explore the dense midfield more as the season goes on. I just want to leave you with one quick shout out for Yanni Stephen Haydens. His performance may have been just fine, but I am just happy he has found a way onto this grid after all. No doubt he'll get better as the season progresses. One last look at America before we get to F3 and upwards. The Formula Regional Americas had its second round, and Titus Sherlock had the perfect comeback to the top of the standings with a clean and comfortable hat-trick. A very pleasant sight after the mechanical issues last time out. Otherwise, the front of the grid looked pretty familiar with the likes of Bruno Ribeiro, Brady Golan and Nicolas Ambiado there or thereabouts, although the latter did not quite bring the form from round 1. I do feel like we have to shout out the F4 USA graduates though. The trio of Daniel Quimby, Nicolas Stati and Connor Roberts looked considerably improved, clearly learning from the debut weekend and even taking a podium in the hands of Connor Roberts. So who knows, maybe one or two of those guys can join the frontrunners later down the year. My money is on Stati for that job. F3 comfortably produced the best racing product at Imola we've got to watch all weekend. Tricky, but not impossible overtaking and a lot of tyre management in the feature to spice things up further. Rafael Camara finally showed a glimpse of weakness after getting his third pole in a row. The Brazilian played a proper game of high-speed chess against Santiago Ramos from start to finish, with the Mexican driver forcing Camara to run at a pace that was clearly just a little bit too high to sustain over the full race distance, resulting in Camara fading to P3 in the closing stages. Perfect example of some exciting racing that did not involve repeated side-by-side action at all. Also a neat drive from Noah Stromstead, recovering from a poor start and doing so well enough to capitalize on Camara's tyre wear by taking P2 from his teammate. And of course, had the race been any longer, he would have had the pace to take the win. Tyre wear really was the name of the game in the rest of the top 10 as well, with Rowland and Prema in particular just fading massively in the closing stages. A P8 for Roman Belinsky as the only point scored between 4 drivers that looked set for points in the first half. Particularly disappointing for Louis Sharp. The Kiwi finally scored his first points with a neat run in the sprint, but clearly overpushed a bit while trying to replicate the same in the feature. The sprint race was the MP Motorsport show, with Tim Tremnitz and Bruno Del Pino taking a pretty comfy 1-2, a great run by Tremnitz to keep himself in the title hunt, while Del Pino got his maiden podium. Pretty pleased with these results all around. Unfortunately, Del Pino did then take himself out in the feature. Quick driver, but definitely still rather rough around the edges, at least for now. Of course, we cannot talk about F3 without mentioning our Finnish tiger, Tuukka Taponen. The Ferrari Junior may not have the equipment to fight for a win, as showcased by the struggles of Lawrence Van Open and James Wharton, but he keeps doing a good job of maximizing what he has to keep himself in the conversation as well. I've got zero doubt in my mind that he'd pick up a win with ease if ART provided the required package. Shout out to Mari Boyer for clearly being the #1 guy at Campos this weekend, really taking the fight to Nikola Zolov here. Sure, heartbreaking engine issues cost him big time in the sprint, but make no mistake, this was a great weekend all around for the Spaniard. In F2, the feature race was almost entirely decided by the mid-race safety car, slightly ruining what could have been a great battle between the two strategies. Either way, Alex Dunne came out of it looking like a star once again. Not just with his usual rapid pace, but particularly by cutting through slower traffic significantly better than his rivals to not just win, but look pretty dominant while doing so. Thanks to a poor quali from Richard Verschoor, this means the Irishman now also finds himself in the lead of this incredibly tight championship battle, but with how tight things have been, it is still way too early to jump to any conclusions. The only conclusion I can jump to is that my pre-season prediction of Dino Beganovic as a champion will not become reality. He may have finally scored a pole and a feature podium, but still lost out quite convincingly to Luke Browning in both the feature and in even more depressing fashion during the sprint. There may have been rumours related to his engine in the first couple rounds. I'd assume those have been sorted out, or surely he wouldn't have put it on pole, but either way, this is too far gone already, I think. Then again, I don't think a second season will hurt him anyway. It's not like there are a bunch of open F1 seats ready for the taking. Prema remains a bit depressing in F2 as well, despite a fantastic qualifying effort from Sebastian Montoya to put it on the front row. Gabriele Mini got utterly ruined by the feature race safety car, not like it was looking promising before that anyway, and Montoya stalled before the formation lap to ruin his day. Somehow, the latter at least recovered to take some points, but surely this must feel like a thoroughly underwhelming weekend for the entire squad. Leonardo Fornaroli continues to impress me big time this season. He really keeps playing to the strengths he's shown in F3, remarkable consistency, the only driver to score points in every single race so far, and always in a position to capitalize on potential errors ahead. Truly an impressive run from a rookie driver, even if his raw pace is still not exactly worth beating. Starting to like the guy more and more with every passing weekend. Shout out to Semi Megatunev, aka the Mega Tuner. I know Trident isn't exactly the hot team to watch, but the Frenchman has so far pretty much dominated Max Esterson at every opportunity and finally got rewarded with his first point after a nice attacking drive. So far, he has looked a fair bit cleaner than his FRECA and F3 self as well. He's definitely at the top of my list of drivers that I'd like to see in a better car next year. For F1, I don't even want to talk about the admittedly pretty decent race this weekend. Instead, a few words about the Jack Doohan and Franco Colapinto swap. If we're just purely looking at the two drivers without any further context, it looks like a bit of a whatever kind of move. Colapinto may have shown a bit more in his short F1 stint, but I'd argue Jack Doohan has still been a bit more impressive if we're looking at their careers holistically. But with how this swap has come about, the actual driver ability matters little anyway. I think it is an utter disgrace how Alpine treats their drivers, again, and think both deserve better than this. Much like the second Red Bull seat, joining Alpine might be more cursed than a blessing at this point in time. Will Colapinto do a better job than Doohan? Possible. He has looked really sharp last season, both in F2 and F1, but Doohan apparently never stood a chance to keep the seat anyway. That really just shouldn't happen ever in a professional sports team, I don't think. Formula E had another doubleheader, this time on the streets of Tokyo, and I think it really is time we just call the championship. Oliver Rowland looks near unbeatable. No matter the conditions or the strategy, the guy just finds himself right at the front in every single race, as shown by his ridiculous 7 top 2s in 9 races. This isn't just pretty unique in Formula E, the way he does it is somewhat unique in any form of spec racing really. Take race 2 as an example, where he was put on a slightly weird offset strategy instead of the team playing it conservative from the lead. And yet, he still made it look easy, using the offset to perfection to retake the lead and back everybody up from there. And on top of all that, given Norman Natto's mediocre form, we can't even really talk about a car advantage either. What an epic season this has been for the guy who should have been a title contender last season as well. The fact that reigning champion Pascal Wehrlein is second in the standings despite despite looking rather average in at least half the races, says everything we need to know about the state of the championship. At least the battle for P2 should keep us entertained until the very last weekend. Taylor Barnard also still firmly in the mix and should be equal on points with Wehrlein right now, but he did of course get wiped out by Matara in the last race. Nevertheless, I can't wait to see what Barnard does with an extra year of experience under his belt next year. And two quick shoutouts to end on: Stoffel van Doorn, or rather Maserati, for a great gamble that paid off, gifting the Belgian a free win by pitting him just before a red flag in race 1. This is exactly the sort of strategy you're supposed to do if you can't win on merit, and to be honest, I sometimes feel we don't see these gambles enough, not just in Formula E, but across the professional series. And second, Dan Ticktum for a fantastic weekend all around, peaking with his maiden podium in the second race. Well deserved after a great day of driving his Kiro Cooper machine right at the front from start to finish. Not a great look for anonymous David Beckman though. Staying in Japan, Super Formula had its autopolis round and the Dandelion dominance at the front has finally been broken. Instead, we're the classic Mugen versus Shotsuboi at the front, with a much better looking Tomoko Nojiri fighting at the front like in the good old times. Tsuboi converting any well-running car into win is no surprise at this point. What was more surprising though was the last bit of help he got along the way. Ayumu Uwasa had shuffled to the lead under safety car, only for his car to give up again while leading the race. Guy really just can't catch a break. He absolutely deserves to stand on the top step of a Super Formula podium this season. Potentially more relevant for the championship might still have been the two rather different races the Dandelion drivers produced from their poor grid positions. While Tadasuke Makino went on quite the excellent recovery drive thanks to a good start and a gamble early stop, Kakino Shinoda had a bit of a shocking getaway and never really made up the lost ground, finishing well out of the points. Sure, Makino didn't score big either, the safety car somewhat ruined his day for sure, but with how closely matched the pair's been so far, this might still be a huge factor come the end of the year. I have not forgotten about Super Formula Lights, but there's only so much we can squeeze into this episode. And while I like Super Formula Lights, what I love more is the elite kart racing we're going to talk about in our quick weekly karting report. The FIA European Championship has kicked off its shifter portion with a couple of good races at Valencia. In KZ2, the order at the front looked a lot like Champions of the Future last weekend, with Maxim Orlov dominating the day ahead of teammate Kasper Schormans, even if the latter got a post-race penalty down to P5, and Max Schleimer. Instead of the Burrell duo to challenge, we had a couple new faces at the front as well, namely TB card ace Ali Goldstein and Formula K driver Tigran Bunatian. The latter notably beating teammate Marcus Kayak, not an easy feat by any means. Shoutout for Noah Wolf for once again putting in a sick charging drive. Going from the back of the grid all the way to P10 in the final was quite the debut. He'll surely be one to watch if he ever starts at the front. And in KZ, the final wasn't boycotted this time, although the Kart Republic squad was notably absent. Pedro Hilbrand this time was the man to beat, leading the charge for Beralart with a flawless weekend, and rookie teammate Christian Batuka did equally well by finding himself in P2 in the standings, even if he had to settle for P3 in the final, behind wildcard Adrian Malero. Mateusz Bagel did end up as the highest placed Saudi card once again, but was aided by a crash for Jean Nomblot in the final, and overall really just did not have the same punch he packed last weekend at Champions of the Future. Still a solid rookie outing overall. And while it won't get its own full segment, I just want to briefly highlight the youngsters racing in the first round of the WSK Euro Series last weekend, at least for our OKJ and OK protagonists. Henry Domain and Christian Castoya dominated the OK Juniors and OK Seniors respectively. Castoya, of course, a known quantity at this point, but I can't help but be stunned by Domain time and time again this season. So fast and consistent, the young lad is truly a pleasure to watch. And one final shout out to end on, even without proper F4 coverage this week, I couldn't just ignore Matilda Part's first trip to the podium. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe she is our first female podium sitter of the year, outside of F1 Academy, of course. But for now, it is your time to drop all of your opinions and predictions down in the comments so we can get our lovely little discussion going. And otherwise, I thank you all for watching and I do hope to catch you in the next one.